Hi, it's Dwyer. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Let's take a swing for the fences. Big time fight. 32-0. Demetrius Andrade against 27-0 David Benavides. Let's take on this fight. Two unbeatens, but first remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now let me just say, and I'm going to sound like a loon, and that's okay. Right? Let me just say, when you see a great fighter, and I mean a great fighter, who knows how to play the angles and who has the timing, who knows how to get just off at the side here, right? Not in the pocket in front of you, but who knows how to move just enough to keep you turning, to keep you lifting your feet, to keep you dealing with awkward angles. When you find a fighter like that, sometimes the crowd is not in love with the fighter. Right? If the fighter is really good, sometimes it looks like his opponents are just having off nights. I'm going to name one of the best fighters of the 1970s. Understand, I was a little kid in the 1970s, and I would go to the barber shop, and everyone knew who this guy was. When this guy fought, people tracked his fights. Right? Back then, people thought he was a real threat to the crown. Understand, this fighter beat Ken Norton. He beat George Foreman. It's after Foreman fought him that Foreman had an epiphany in the locker room. Right? His trainer believes Foreman was just heat exhausted. Foreman believes that God was talking to him. Foreman became a preacher after fighting Jimmy Young. Jimmy Young also beat Ron Lyle not once but twice. Jimmy Young fought Ernie Shavers, one of the hardest punchers of the 1970s. The fight went the distance. Jimmy Young got a draw. In my opinion, Jimmy Young's fight against Muhammad Ali, which was on TV, I saw it on TV as it happened, was one of the best fights I've ever seen. Ali is so frustrated and trying to figure out Jimmy Young in the middle of the ring that Ali goes over to the ropes and motions for Jimmy Young to come join him. Jimmy Young waves at Ali, refuses to go over to the ropes. Right? I'm just telling you, I thought Young got ripped off that night. An argument can be made that Young won that fight. Young does make a couple of mistakes in that fight. He's over by the ropes later, sticks his head between the ropes. Right? Ali was up on him. If you're an Ali person, you believe Ali was about to knock him out. If you're a Jimmy Young person, you believe Jimmy Young was toying with Ali. Right? Well, just understand. I mentioned Jimmy Young, great fighter. He started to lose his neurological health in the 1980s. Please don't judge Jimmy Young from the 1980s, right? I believe he ended up with dementia, probably boxing induced. Just food for thought. But understand, Demetrius Andrade is very much like Jimmy Young. When you watch an Andrade fight, Andrade knows how to move. Andrade, unlike Caleb Plant, is two-handed. Understand, Andrade is a southpaw. He knows how to move. He has a little herky-jerky thing going, so it throws off the timing of opponents. Like Jimmy Young, he's a master at hitting you when you don't expect it, even several rounds into the fight. If Andrade, who's deconstructing you from the first round, figures you out, then like Jimmy Young, he's going to start to pull away in the match. Right? Jimmy Young ends up knocking down George Foreman in the last round. Right? Some will call it a knockdown, some will call it a push. But let's just say Jimmy Young had disengaged George Foreman in a way that's hard to imagine. Right? Foreman standing in front of Young, unable to land hard shots. Right? That's who Jimmy Young is. Think about it. He fights Foreman and Shavers, two of the hardest punchers of the entire decade. He beats Foreman, he gets the draw with Shavers. Right? Andrade, to me, is a Hall of Fame caliber fighter. What he needs is a signature fight. He's taking on 27-0 David Benavides, who, by the way, has already been the champ at 168 pounds. Now, let me just say, Andrade has grown into 168 pounds. People didn't want to fight him at 160. Andrade, for years, has been one of the most avoided fighters in the entire sport. It's hard to capture the fans' imagination when people are avoiding you. Now, don't cry for Andrade. He made his money. He signed big money deals with outfits like DAZN, for example. But even then, fighters did not want to fight him. Now, this fight's at 168 where Benavides has more experience. Just understand, Benavides' experience is much more vast than you or I want to believe. Because out of the ring, 27-0 Benavides has trained extensively with Gennady Golovkin, with Gilberto Ramirez. By the way, one of the secrets to Gilberto Ramirez is the fact that he is one of the better body punchers in boxing. Right? Let me just say this, and I know it's going to be controversial. Like Canelo, Gilberto Ramirez, who is about to fight Joe Smith, Gilberto Ramirez fought Dimitri Bivol. Right? Just understand, Gilberto Ramirez had more success going to Bivol's body than did Saul Alvarez. One man's opinion. Understand, too, talking of Bivol, that's another guy that Benavides has sparred with. Right? Benavides has the bigger punch than Andrade, who does have a punch, but not an outsized punch like David Benavides. Benavides is better in the pocket, where Benavides is a pursuer. Just understand that Andrade is better outside of the pocket. I would argue that Andrade has the faster foot speed and is the better athlete. Right? Let me say this too. I have no doubt, and I know this is denied by Andrade, but I have no doubt that one of the reasons why Andrade is interested in this fight is because Benavides had problems in the early rounds against Caleb Plant. But I would argue that Benavides was fighting two people that day, Plant and the referee. As it was, Benavides catches up with Plant the second half of the fight and puts on a show, because there are very few in the sport who are better than Benavides in the pocket. Right? I believe two facts govern the outcome of this fight. The first is that Andrade is 35 years old. Benavides, who's been on the main stage for a long time, is all of 26 years old. To me, it's too big an ask, with a 9-year age gap, to ask Andrade to beat Benavides on his back foot using movement against a sharpshooter, right? Benavides walks around like he's a tough guy. In actuality, Benavides is a boxing nerd. This is a technician. Benavides is extremely accurate Benavides is a guy who makes adjustments as the fight goes along. I believe the age gap is too great here for Andrade to overcome, right? Let me add a second reason, and it's the Jimmy Young reason, right? Some people on their back foot draw you into the ring with them, right? We love seeing Ali on his back foot, didn't we? Against Sonny Liston. We love seeing Ray Leonard move away from Marvin Hagler, right? The Hagler crowd believes that Ray was running, right? But there's a group in boxing who, felt that Ray Leonard could walk on water, literally, and that Ray, moving against the champ, the middleweight champ, the multi-year middleweight champ, deserved to take the title, right? But then you also have movers who we don't like for some odd reason. Revisit the last 3 rounds of Oscar De La Hoya's fight against unbeaten Felix Trinidad. Folks, it was huge at the time. You either believe that those 3 rounds are 3 of the best rounds that Oscar ever fought. He's moving. He has Trinidad looking robotic. He's hitting Trinidad, then he's moving away in a fight that Oscar was ahead on most of the scorecards going into the last 3 rounds. You either believe Oscar is putting on a boxing exhibition, or you believe, like the judges did apparently, that Oscar was running, even as Oscar's landing shots on Felix Trinidad. I believe Andrade, for whatever reason, and life's unfair, doesn't get congratulated or even appreciated for his movement in the ring. Obviously, you don't get to 32-0 unless you're impressing the judges, right? Andrade's impressing some people, but not the crowd. While Ray Leonard could be out of the ring for years, I'm not kidding, for years, and then signed to fight one of the best fighters in boxing at the time, the guy who owned the middleweight division, have credibility, generate huge pay-per-view numbers, generate a sellout, have fans flocking, have fans believing that Ray Leonard off retinal surgery in the 80s would be competitive against Marvin Hagler. Just understand that Andrade doesn't connect with fans that way. We see him moving and we're unimpressed. He has the problem Jimmy Young had. Understand, folks, I was alive in the 70s. Jimmy Young is one of the best boxers in the heavyweight division in the 1970s. The guys he fought shows you that, right? He really should be a major part of Philadelphia's heavyweight history. He's not, right? Jimmy Young was always viewed as an underdog. I believe Andrade, for whatever reason, as he bounces around the ring and makes Benavides miss, is not going to be given credit by the public. The bet I like is the younger man, Benavides, to win the fight, hedged with the over. Right? The only way, in my opinion, that Andrade can win this fight is if the fight goes several rounds, right? The distance or close to the distance. Even then, I have my doubts on whether an older guy who's moving away from the younger guy is going to be rewarded with the rounds. Let me also let people in on a secret. Boxing is a little bit skewed, as Canelo's finding out right now, toward younger fighters. right? You hear about a younger fighter, and George Foreman believed this when he lost a questionable fight to Tommy Morrison, right? You're fighting a younger fighter, and people think the younger fighter's the future. They want to be part of the future. They feel that if the younger fighter blows up and wins this fight and continues building his image, there's going to be more money in the sport for everyone. I'm not saying that the judges are in on the take, but you understand who the big money side of the play is, right? So you have a lot of people who saw John McDermott beat Tyson Fury. At least to them, only to hear Tyson Fury, the young lion, get awarded the decision. Right here you have 26-year-old David Benavides. He's the young lion in this fight. If it's close, I believe ties, not that it should be this way, but it is this way, I believe ties will go to the younger fighter. Just revisit, and I thought Devin Haney won the fight, but just revisit Devin Haney against Lomachenko. Right? You see a young guy, he's on the way up, he's doing things the right way, he's fighting big-time opponents, and you want to reward him. You look at the older fighter and you think, well, gee, how much longer is he going to be in the sport? If I give him this decision, right, that hurts the younger guy. Not only that, if this older guy then leaves the sport in a year, what have I really accomplished? So I believe there's a structural bias. I know I'm sounding loony. Let the chips fall where they may. But I believe there's a structural bias in the sport, right? I believe right now, take Canelo, great fighter, first ballot Hall of Famer. Now people are looking at him and they're saying, whoa, he's in his 30s, isn't he? Right now we're watching fights where Canelo jumps out to a lead on fighters, right? The Ryder fight. Jumps out to a lead, is looking good, then he fades a little bit in the closing rounds, and folks are panicked. Or they're saying, man, Canelo hasn't looked good of late. Isn't that the talk right now? Before the Charlo fight, by the way, for those keeping track, Charlo's actually older than Canelo. Just food for thought. Well, here I believe Andrade is up against the sport. He's the older guy. He's facing a guy who hasn't lost, who has a very good chin, who's going to be the pursuer. So Andrade has to make him miss and stylistically convince us that he's winning rounds. I believe it's a high ask, right? We'll talk about who actually wins the fight when the fight happens. But the way I'm betting the fight is to take Benavides simply to win, hedged with the over. I'm expecting Andrade to win the early rounds. Then I'm expecting Benavides, who is a marksman, to start going to Andrade's body. Why? Because Andrade's upper body is hard to hit. Andrade is tall. He knows how to lean. He has exquisite timing. So Benavides, who is technical, is going to have to cut off the ring, and he's going to have to take away Andrade's movement. The best way to do that is through Andrade's body. Benavides is a hellacious body puncher. I believe Andrade's going to slow down. This fight could be controversial. This could be Hagler-Leonard, where at the end of the fight, I'm just telling you today, at least 40% of the public believes Marvin Hagler won that fight. Right? It could be controversial where we say, gee, who actually won this fight? Or it could be the big puncher chopping down the tree. The younger man, 9 years younger, catching up with an older guy who doesn't quite have the stamina that he had when he was 26 years old. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. If you want to talk about Jimmy Young in the comment section, or any fighter from the 70s, or Hagler, Leonard from the 80s, please feel free to do so in the comment section of this YouTube video. I view Benavides as a sharpshooter, a technician, a guy who had David Lemieux's left hook blocked, allowed Lemieux, a slugger, to be the aggressor in that fight. Right? To me, Benavides is dangerous. This is an epic fight. Let's hope it happens. I also view Andrade as a Hall of Fame talent. But I'm just telling you, at the end of the day, we remember fighters by who they fought. Right? Deontay Wilder, the best thing he did as a pro was fight Tyson Fury 3 times. Understand, every time Tyson Fury looks good and doesn't get knocked down, we're going to remember that Wilder knocks him down multiple times in multiple fights. Right? Never beats him. But we can say Wilder fought the best of his generation. Right? Even if somebody else, like an Usyk, comes along. Right? We mentioned Ray Leonard. I'm just telling you, Ray Leonard fought Benitez, Duran, Hearns, Hagler. That's how we remember him. Right? Andrade just doesn't have that level of resume. Benavides himself needs more scalps, but has more time since he's 26 years old. Right? My problem with Anthony Joshua is, how could you be in an era with Wilder and Fury and not fight either of them at least once? In the moment, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Right? Later, it will. Understand, few people remember Jimmy Young. Jimmy Young beat Ken Norton. Jimmy Young beat George Foreman. Jimmy Young beat Ron Lyle twice. In my opinion, he gave Ali one of the best fights of Ali's career, and he got a draw with Ernie Shavers. Right? Andrade needs this fight for legacy. Benavides, unbeaten, wants to fight Canelo. Right? Wants to get his name on the upper rung of boxing. He hasn't done so yet. He needs this fight. This fight at 168 is a must watch. Let me close with this. Canelo, just understand, before he shows up, it's the Canelo massacre. He shows up at 168. 4 different guys have a share of the title. Now just understand, Canelo at this point has already beaten Miguel Cotto, has already beaten Danny Jacobs, convinced one judge at least that he deserved at least a draw against Floyd Mayweather. I'm not saying he did, but that's the record. He shows up, he wipes out the 168-pound division. While he's doing it, he jumps to 175 and wipes out Kovalev. If Benavides and Andrade want to be considered among the all-time greats, that's the kind of resume that they're going to have to try to match. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Thanks for stopping by.